Yes, Eric, thank you so much. Look, I texted Dave. I said, Dave, I need Eric back on the show for two reasons. One, to tell him how much I love him, and two, to yell at him. One, it was so fun getting to talk to you and then getting to go and watch the games and thinking about what you and I spoke about and watching what you told me. Why I want to yell at you is because you told me that we were going to march through Texas Tech, and we didn't do that, Eric. Okay, I was cursing you on Saturday night in so many ways. Not really, but what you said was right. We couldn't pull our head out of our butts there. But first of all, give us your thoughts and recap of this past weekend, and then we gotta dive into the Final Four. I know only got some short time, but
Yeah, honestly, I'm good for 15 or 20 here if you guys want.
okay.
I know I might be keeping you late. So for all
No,
these
you're
listeners
good.
that are grinding it out, I mean, hey, this is the time to do it right before the Final Four. So thank you to everyone who's still on. But I think that really Florida's tournament on a whole, and this is even going back to the UConn game. I know you asked about the last week, which was the second weekend, the Sweet 16 Elite Eight, but uh, I feel like all of these games, and you can include UConn in that, are games where the Gators have not played particularly well, have not played their best, and have still won. And I think that a lot of Florida fans see that as a positive thing, where it is like, we have not even played our best basketball and we are in the Final Four. So I think that that was a pretty good way of talking about that Texas Tech game, where given the way that they struggled to guard a lot of those post up isolations that we talked about on this show, and struggle to keep some of those 3-point shooters from getting loose, like we talked about on the show, and didn't take advantage of some of the mismatches on the other end, like we talked about on the show. And that's why the Gators were down by 10 with just a couple minutes left. And what this one really came down to is one team had Walter Clayton Jr. and the other didn't. And that's how this great sport of basketball works, where you have moments like this. And again, going back to the Maryland game, it's still so confusing. I'm sure some people have seen by now, but their coach very quickly after that game left for Villanova, which was the big rumor before. So a lot of people saying there was a lot of distraction. Some guys were in the portal hours after Florida beat them. So, but whatever it is, Florida can't control that. They took care of business there. And yeah, with that Texas Tech game, it's just one of those things that if you believe in teams of destiny, it's kind of looking like this Florida team could be one. They've had their moment taking down the champ in UConn, the two-time defending champ. They've had the moment of it looked certain that they were going to lose. If you're into win probability charts, which I'm like, not totally. Works in some sports better than
Basketball's
basketball, but
weird.
I
Yeah.
believe but I believe Texas Tech had a 96% chance at one point, according to ESPN, if you're into that. And Florida had that moment where they just absolutely snatched victory from the claws of defeat, or whatever you want to say, whatever metaphor you want to use. And yeah, it just seems like Florida is going through somewhat of a charmed run to the Final Four, and it's great to be here talking about it.
One guy you got it wrong. Only one thing you said incorrectly. One team had Thomas Howe, and the other team did
Hey,
not.
that's it, really.
That was
Yeah,
I mean, hey, I'm glad
yeah.
I'm glad you corrected me, because I thought he was Florida's best player against
That's
Texas Tech, and I'm
oh,
glad. Hey, I'm glad
it was
you
no
you
question. I corrected
and
Gators Dave too. He tweeted, he made a
hey,
whole article.
well,
He goes, thanks to Walter Clayton. I put a little asterisk, thanks to Thomas Howe,
hey, look,
because he was by far the best player.
I was gonna say AB even had him as the you know what of the week. I don't know if I can
Cracker
say
of
it
the
on
week.
YouTube.
You can say cracker of the
mm,
week.
I don't know. I don't know what they
Cracker
consider
of the day.
yeah,
accurate or
there,
Cracker
not
of
look,
the
on
day.
YouTube.
yeah, Hightop Sports After Dark. I think that again, you see, like, it's one of those situations that if Walter Clayton doesn't go nuclear at the end of the game, you're actually looking at this of like, wow, Florida has one of the best players that they've ever had in program history, and he unfortunately didn't show up when they needed him the most, because he did not have a very good 35 minutes against Texas Tech. And like you said, Thomas Houck played 40 awesome minutes from the moment he got into the game in the first half. One of the only players to make things happen offensively. Someone who was targeted repeatedly on the low block by Darion Williams and Texas Tech, and held his own. And of course, everyone is going to look, and I would say correctly, at those Walter Clayton threes at the end of the game and see him as a hero. But like, Houck was knocking down shots in the clutch too. And it's just, yeah, I do think he was Florida's best game when you look at the entirety. Of course, Walter Clayton. That's also some of Walter Clayton's brilliance, is that he can play a bad half And then you still look at the end of the game and you're like, wow, he won it for us. And it's like, well, he's, you're maybe a little bit behind a little bit because of his play, but he also has that ability to explode. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you had Hauk that played a very steady, complete game of basketball. And when the starter Ruben Chinyelu was not playing very well and had to get pulled pretty quickly on a couple of occasions, when it got to that Alex Condon at the 5 and Hauk coming in there at the 4, I mean that has been Florida's best front court combination, and they showed why once again against Texas Tech.
Walter had 30 points, so I understand where, if you look at it from a stat sheet, he had 30, but I think 16 or 18 of them were from the line. I'm not taking away from the points, but he was getting fouled a lot. It wasn't hitting the shots we needed, so he quietly got like 17 points and nobody even knew. Thomas Howell put up 22 or 20 points, 9 boards, and like 5 assists, but on top of that, just his impact defensively. Walter was kind of quiet at times, but then again, towards the end, Walter was there, but Thomas Howell through the entire game was a factor to the point that he earned minutes in Maryland because of Condon, right? You ever watch your favorite football team, whether college or NFL, and you see the hold? Where's the flag, ref? Where is it? You're calling, you're whistling, or sometimes it's the other way around. They call the hold, and you're like, open your eyes, ref. Well, now you get your chance to have your voice heard. With Penalty Verdict, you get to do all of that. With Penalty Verdict, you get to vote on penalties called in real time on both NFL and college football games. Engage with the community of football fans who desire fair play and accountability. Unlock the next dimension of sports by engaging with real-time polling of referees, players, and teams. View data-driven insights to help inform discussions about the game. Penalty Verdict is the development phase, and we would love to hear back from you. What features do you want to see in the app for next football season? Check out penaltyverdict.com/Hightop Sports to get in on the action now. Listen, boys, you and I both know we have had our moments of hooting and hollering. Now's your time to speak up. We're giving you the platform. Take advantage of it. And then I think Golden recognized pretty quickly. It's like, this is the best player on the court right now. I'd be an idiot not to play him. And so that's where it's like, for me, it's like, it's not just, don't look at the stats. I understand Walter put up 30. It's kind of a weird 30. But it wasn't like, to me, the 20 that Tom, and this isn't to take anything away. I feel like we're getting into a pissing on who did better. Both were phenomenal. Walter hit massive shots. All did great things. But yes, that's the thing that I've been riding on, is like, everyone's like, how do you feel? It's like, I feel great because Florida has looked like complete doo-doo since the SEC championship in the first half of Norfolk. Since that, like, the last 10 minutes and a punched whiteboard, we haven't seen a good basketball team. And the positive on that is Auburn had a cold 3 or, basically 5 games going into the tournament, and they've been hot for the last few weeks. Can we see a flip here? Now, that's where I'm going to next, because you gave me a good kind of blueprint of what to expect going into that last weekend. I was able to sleep a little bit better at night. Now we've got Auburn facing them again, and it looks like it's going to be Duke. I don't even know if we need to talk about Houston, but let's talk about Auburn first. And what do you think of your expectations, and how do you feel about going into it?
Yeah, Auburn's just had one of the strangest seasons in college basketball, where right now everyone, and rightfully so, is saying Duke is one of the best teams that we've seen in college basketball in 25 years. And whether it's the eye test, whether it's any metric system evaluating that, that is totally true. Duke is unbelievably strong. And with Auburn, they were the team that was doing that for much of the season. And the only reason they stepped back was because they won the SEC regular season with 2 games to spare, and then stopped caring and lost the 2 games in the 2 final games of the regular season, could not flip the switch back on in the SEC tournament. And to be honest, I also think didn't play particularly well to start the SEC tournament. And that's something that, again, is it's something that's always interesting to talk about, how difficult it is in sports, not just basketball, but all sports, for once you flip the switch off, how hard it is to flip that switch back on. And I feel like Auburn has seen that firsthand. And again, we know that this was the strongest SEC the league has ever been, and the SEC was one of the strongest conferences that college basketball has ever seen, arguably the best. And I think that that's why we talk about Florida winning the SEC tournament as a remarkable feat, and that is understandably so. Auburn was 15-1 in the regular season. Like, that is absurd in the strongest the SEC has ever been. And again, it's also important to note, of course, the SEC doesn't have a balanced schedule. And that's actually one area that Florida got quite a favorable draw. But Florida really had the easiest schedule in the SEC this year. Obviously, they were a really good team. I'm not saying they're fraudulent or were propped up by this bad schedule, but I do it just to point out that Auburn played a more difficult SEC schedule and still locked up the number one seed with 2 games to spare, and we're 15-1. Like that is outrageous, and it shows how good they were, and then it shows just how crazy it was that they would lose 3 of their 4 games going into the NCAA tournament. And again, I thought they started slow their first couple of games. They started to show a little bit of that life of the team that was so dominant for so much of the college basketball season. And then I think against Michigan State for the first time, it was like, oh boy, this is the Auburn that we saw for months in the college basketball season. They looked like they were playing their strongest. And then Janai Broom took this wild fall where he looked like he broke everything.
I thought it was done.
If people did not see this fall, I'll tell you the exact experience. He had this fall, and I'm like, oh my goodness, his elbow just bent 100%
Yeah.
backwards. I'm like,
Yeah.
his arm is broken. Then the commentator was like, oh my goodness, did you see that Alex Condon might have hurt his, or sorry, Janai Brew might have hurt his knee on this fall?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what are you talking about? And then the other guy's like, oh, I thought he hurt his wrist. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And then they showed the replay, and his elbow hyperextended, his wrist hyperextended, he landed on his knee, which hyperextended, and then his ankle looked like it folded. So it was like this Looney Tunes fall that you're like, his not only is he done for this game, he's like, what's he going to do next year when he gets drafted to the NBA? Like, this guy's going to be out for a while. And then of course, a few minutes later, he's back and he knocks down a 3 in his with his first shot. So he didn't practice the last couple of days. They say he's going to play. And I mean, again, this isn't the NFL where you get fined for not being truthful on your injury reports. So who knows if it's gamesmanship or what. I just have such a hard time imagining that Janai Broom is going to be at 100%. For everyone who saw that fall, it's unfathomable.
thought he was
Again,
done.
Alex Condon is also not going to be
Yeah.
at 100%. But yeah, I think for us who saw it live, I mean, like we thought we thought his ankle, knee, wrist, and elbow were all cooked, and then he was back playing great. So, yeah, that is my long breakdown of Auburn's season. But man, against Michigan State before that injury, and a little bit when Janai did come back and still looked okay, I do think they were looking like the team that was super dominant. And hey, that's at the same time, Florida beat them right in the midst of their SEC dominance. I mentioned that they sealed
Yeah.
they sealed the SEC regular season title at 15-1. The one loss was to Florida. So at that point, so Florida beat them while they were playing their best. So Florida's got to be a confident team going into the second matchup.
In the fan perspective, you kind of like the battle testedness that this Florida team has had to endure, because now that we're on the other side of it, we won it, we're okay with it. Where Auburn, it's kind of coasted. Not saying they haven't played anybody, but Creighton was kind of flying high. Again, a UConn number 9 is a much greater number 9 seed than Creighton, although Creighton kind of came in kind of hot and heavy. That Michigan team was solid. I can't take anything away from that. That was a good game, but they weren't tested in the sense, and not that Maryland was, I think Michigan was better than Maryland, but we struggled. So we had to find out who we were. And then, of course, the Texas Tech game, you learned a lot really quickly, where Michigan State, they kind of dominated the whole time. Never really had to battle through that. So we'll see, because they haven't really had to truly face adversity, where if Florida is able to get them into this in this environment, I think that could be their advantage. Because when you look at matchup, when you look at talent, when you look at coaching, some people are going to argue that Bruce Pearl, obviously being SEC Coach of the Year, is better. Give me Todd G any day of the week right now. But I think talent-wise, I think Florida has what it takes personally. And again, when we talk about matchups before, I think they match up well with all the remaining teams. It just depends on what Florida team decides to lock in. Is that how you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned talent, and that's something that, again, I think is so remarkable about Auburn's season, is just the fact that, again, I don't think that they're a super talented team. And again, that's funny to say. I mentioned that Janai Broom is going to be the player of the year in a lot of people's votes. It's him or Cooper Flag is the consensus for who's the best player in college basketball this year. One of the two. So it's funny to say for a team that has that player that they're like not super talented. But again, it's a group of guys that largely has had such success because of their system and the way that they play so structured and play so well off each other, and how the pieces fit together. And again, I think that that's remarkable. But because of that, they were also a team that in the regular season didn't have a lot of close games because they were blowing people out, and they don't necessarily have that guard one-on-one who can go create a play and hit a big shot. And again, they've got guards that can make shots for sure, but not ones that are particularly physical, shedding off a defender, or particularly quick, like we've been kind of known to know from Auburn guards recently. So it is one of those things that I feel like in the game script that could occur here, I kind of feel like if it's a close game down the stretch, Florida likes their chances. And if Auburn is just the far more disciplined team and the more structured team, then it's like Auburn's going to win by 7 or 8. But I feel like it's either Florida wins by 1 or 2 because they've got the better closers, or Auburn wins by 7 or 8 because they're a much more structured team that starts a lot better than Florida. Again, starts have been an issue for the Gators, and I mean Auburn's a team that doesn't really come at you in waves because, again, like I said, they play super structured. They pound the ball inside. They make you guard multiple actions on the same possession, and they play an extremely steady game, and it's worked very, very well for them. Whereas the Gators have that up and down, which might make for some frustration. And hey, they've ended up on the up a lot more than they've ended on the down. They're in the Final Four for a reason, but that also makes this matchup really interesting. But again, I think this is one where I think the opening minutes are going to be pretty big because we saw how many things it took to go right for the Gators to get back against Texas Tech. And yeah, they showed it's possible for sure. I'm just not sure that you can pull yourself out of that hole against an Auburn like you could against a Texas Tech. With all due respect to Texas Tech, which is also great, Auburn is still a step up because that's what happens in the NCAA tournament. Your matchups step up in difficulty. So that's it. So again, I really do have a lot of respect for this Auburn team, but do they have that kind of overwhelming wave of shot making, or the guy who can take over at the end of the game in a Walter Clayton fashion? Like I don't think so.
And that's Florida dominated Auburn in a sense the first time, because if you talk like what you just said, they stay consistent, and Florida didn't have too many hiccups. So when Florida was able to get ahead and not make any mistakes, Auburn doesn't have necessarily firing power to kind of elevate them. So if
Mhm.
Florida can just not be stupid, you got to like their, like you said, like their chances of their ability to. And I feel confident against Auburn. Honestly, Duke is what scares me because they possess, I feel, the same mold as Auburn, really good in Cooper Flag, but the surrounding pieces also fit into the system. Great coach, but those supporting systems are also really good, and they are very disciplined and have just curb stomped everybody. And so
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting. Sorry, Dave, go ahead. Eric fires me
No,
up, so
you know what? As I said, I know I'm not the biggest basketball expert, but you can't tell me that you weren't kind of laughing when you went back and looked at the film and watched Walter Clayton go to the paint, and then he just turned around and did a 180 from the 3-point
well,
line
he had to
because
check
there's
the
like
ball,
three
Dave.
guys on him.
He had to check the ball up court. He had to hit the ribs. He got to check it.
But it was
You gotta
funny
go to
because there was
Yeah,
like
I
three guys rushed him, and he's just like, "All right, I'll go back here and shoot a 3."
I mean, in the house that Steph Curry built in San Francisco, it looked like Steph Curry. It looked like something that Steph Curry does. Usually, Steph Curry does those things when he's up by 20 and is just starting to mess around. But that's the kind of thing that you see Steph Curry doing, just keeping his dribble alive. Oh, I think I'm just gonna sprint back to the 3-point line and turn on one leg and put it up. And yeah, that's going to be, again, if you're looking at the moments that you might look back at following a Florida championship as those legendary moments, or for, college basketball fans who wait for the one shining moment video after the national championship game, whether or not Florida wins, that one's going to be in there. But yeah, I do think when you look back at really anyone's NCAA tournament run, maybe not like UConn last year, they kind of just rolled everyone, but
Yeah.
usually you need a moment like that. So for Florida to have that moment, it almost seemed like just like that checkbox you need of oh yeah, you got to have a moment like that on your way to a championship. Again, if you're someone who's into the narratives and the team of destiny thing, that really seems
Yep.
to follow college basketball in a way that I don't see the same way in college football. I feel in college football, like the best teams win, the most talented teams win, the best coach teams win, where there's like a little room for this kind of magic in college basketball. Maybe that changes a little bit. I mean, a Final Four like this where it's 4-1 seeds, maybe it's going to start being like college football where your big dogs eat and are going to meet each other at the end. But and again, I'm not suggesting Florida isn't a big dog and required this Cinderella. Florida's no Cinderella, don't get me wrong, but it does seem like you still need some of these magical moments to win a championship most years. And yeah, that's going to be one that a lot of people remember.
Well, basketball, I've always argued, because the way the pros is handled, it's a series sport, right? And so when you take a series sport and put it into this one game vacuum, that's what you get. Football isn't a series sport, it's built differently. So that's why you do kind of have the stronger just slowly start to pull away because that's how it's built. Baseball is very similar too. Like if you have the wild card
Mm.
changed from a one and done game because you necessarily weren't getting the best team. It was what team had a magic run, which team caught a spark, and now that spark can carry in baseball, which is a different argument in itself. But yeah, I agree. I watching the game on Saturday, I was actually talking to a buddy of mine. I go, listen, we hit the Angels in the outfield with them, and then they went on a run. All right, the boys, look, the God smiled down on the Gators that day, and there was a few things where I kind of like stopped for a minute. And I was like, I know it doesn't feel right now, but somebody grab that ball and put it back in Walter Clayton's hair because that should have been a turnover. The 3-pointer that hit 9 rims and off the backboard and off Thomas's house forehead and went in, that shouldn't have gone in. Like there was just weird things that kept happening that I was like, these things, the ball was falling the right way at the worst time for Texas Tech. And you're 100% right that sometimes it's a little bit of magic goes a long way in a tournament like this. And you're right. They seem to be the team that has this kind of aura around them outside the other three that really haven't had too many blemishes, right? No other teams have had this kind of scare heading into this. So
Yeah, Dave, I actually have a question for you as
Yeah.
someone who, you felt like you've needed to preface everything you've said with like, oh, I'm not the biggest basketball, but which is, hey, we're everyone right now. We're all big basketball guys. Anyone listening to this, everyone is welcome at the party. But I am curious the fact you're probably engaging with this team in a way that you probably haven't when recent years when the Gators were not NCAA tournament teams or maybe teams that would feel lucky to win a game or two. I'm curious what your experience has been like watching this year, and again talking about some of these explosive scoring runs. Like, do you think that this style of play that the Gators have, where they are pretty fast and loose, and they'll make some hilarious mistakes, but also some absolutely glorious moments of excellence? Like, do you feel like that has engaged you more than if they were a team that was winning games 60-58 and were just grinding it out? Or I'm just curious how style of play has really worked to grab, like, again, I'll say maybe the more casual fan, or and yeah, I'm just curious what your experience has been like watching this team.
Oh man, I'm a big football guy, but man, watching this basketball now I'm kind of into it because we're doing. I've bandwagoned a little bit to the basketball, but
That's
the, the
great.
the biggest thing for me is the anxiety you get just from football. But now we got to do it in basketball too. So I
Hmm.
try to like temper my mindset of like, hey, you're not the basketball guy, but man, I'm really watching this team right now. Is this how every year is? Because like I remember being in our chat and I'm like, man, there's like a foul every minute. Like, I can't stand this. Like, because I'm not
Mm.
used to watching basketball. I'm used to watching football. So everybody's just laughing at me. And then I remember tweeting out, I remember being in a chat and I said, man, we might be cooked during Texas Tech. And then
you
we come
texted
back and
me.
win.
You texted me
Yeah,
too. That
yeah.
was good.
And then I tweeted it out and I said, how many of you guys thought we were cooked? Just about everybody was like, I'm not gonna lie, I thought we were done. So watching an ending like that to like just a basketball game, it doesn't even matter what sport. That's remarkable. That
Mm.
that is something you don't see. That 180 spin around 3-pointer where he just was like, okay, I'll run back and shoot three. I was just like, oh my God, this kid is good. And for him to have not like such a good first half, still score 30 points, that's crazy. And I believe, like, just watching it as a fan, if Florida can play 2 clean games in a row, I think they're winning a national championship. I really do because I think they're that good. Now, I do think Duke is the more consistent team, and they do have really good, solid players across the board, not just Cooper Flag. They've got many other players. I don't know their names, but I've seen them on the court. And, it's going to take Florida's best game to beat Duke if they make it there. Of course, they got to get
Yeah.
past Auburn first, but they're really going to have to play some solid, clean games down the stretch.
The what's I've always loved about basketball over football is it's the bang moments, which you saw the clip.
Mm.
Like there's just so many. There's the lows are really bad, and it's such a quick interchanging game. So it's ping pong of emotions, back and forth, and so again, a run like that, again, when you go back to the metrics or you said like the chart, like it was a 96% chance they were going to lose. You see that in any other sport, it's it's a lock most 96%
Mm.
of the time, where it's hard to measure that
Yeah.
in basketball because of how quickly the game can change in 2 minutes. It's nuts. Where 2 minutes left in the football game down by 10, like it's over. It's not there, it's hard to get really that bang bang play. It's just the momentum, like your heart rate does not move the same way. Like football when it hits though, oh my, it's like heroin. Like not that I've done it, but
Yeah.
I'm reading a book about Red Hot Chili Peppers, and when he describes them, like that's what it feels like. It's when Ricky Pearsall catches it in the back of the end zone. I was like, this is how I feel. So I think it hits a lot harder in football, but basketball is like it's constant, which is it's a different kind of fun for sure, especially when it's your team. Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna start
Yeah,
watching
no,
hoop.
it's it's been great to see so many more people engaging with the team in a way they haven't for a long time. So I just always I love hearing people's experiences with it, whether they're huge basketball fans or they don't profess to be huge basketball fans. Yeah, it's great for me to hear. So I just wanted to hear your perspective, Dave. That's great.
Yeah, I will admit I bandwagon to it. I won't lie, but I
Yes.
will say this: the reason I go and say, "Well, I'm not the biggest basketball guy," because I don't want to sound stupid, because I don't know too much about it yet. So I'm still learning. Obviously, I know some of the players' names and who are the good players for Florida, but yeah, I mean, just kind of trying to, I guess, just engage with more of the basketball fans and learning more about it. It is really interesting. I mean, I will say that, but man, it's like I look at it like my anxiety gets too high during football season. I don't know if I can do it twice a year.
It's been exhausting. For basketball, like I think it's if you don't really love a sport, it's always easy to pick a team. It's easier to get involved when you can pick a team and you can cheer for it, because then you're just cheering for the W's, and then when that passion grows, it grows even further. That's where it started for me
Yeah.
for basketball. But Eric, man, this again a blast getting to pick your ear and kind of hear your thoughts and perspective on it. Again, I was in shambles. I was like, Eric told me this is supposed to be the easy game. This is not the easy game. I'm in shambles here. But it ended up being the easy game. I
It
don't know
was
why I
supposed
doubted you.
to.
And we just needed to be down 10 with 3 to go. That was honestly, I was good until we got to that 3-minute mark. The problem was we weren't hitting a bucket. We couldn't buy a bucket. And even when Thomas shot us 3, I was like, like when Walter shoots it, it just feels like it's going to go in. Like it's just so smooth. It's buttery. House is a little, I would say, kind of mechanical at times. So it doesn't just look
Mm.
as natural, but exciting whites. They get it done. All right. Cracker of the day for a reason, baby. Eric, thank you again, man. Hopefully, look, we'll see how this weekend goes, but maybe we do a victory lap. You know what I'm saying? We'll have a maybe you come on, just champagne, the whole shebang, and we celebrate. But tell them where they can find
Yeah.
you, man, and keep up with the last little bit of basketball talk before it's all over with.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if Florida wins a national championship in a major sport like college basketball, I hope we milk this thing for as much as it's worth, and there's plenty of celebration for the days to follow, weeks to follow. So, anyways, thanks so much for having me on, guys. People can follow me at Eric Fawcett _ my all my writing is at GatorCountry.com. I have a Florida basketball podcast called Florida Basketball Hour. And this week, or really the last couple of weeks, we've launched a Patreon this year, and really most of the work has been on the Patreon. So if you are just like binging so much content, you want anything Florida basketball right now, because it feels like it's so long between the Texas Tech game and when the Gators will finally play on Saturday, which still feels super far in the future. Our Patreon will have hours and hours of diverse content. So yeah, that's all the places you can check me out.
It does feel far, but it's been nice to like see a Georgia fan, and there's a UConn guy that I work with. Just like I asked him, like, "Hey, do you guys play this weekend?" It's been a blast. Every day I get to ask him that, so I don't mind the long break. It gives me one more day just to rub it in and remind them that they are not playing this weekend and that we are. So if you guys see an FSU, I asked FSU, "Hey, how'd you guys do in the NIT?" They can't answer that question either. So it's been a blast. I've enjoyed this time of March. It's been fun, and they're like, "Oh, you care, and I care, and that's all that matters."